David Kessler and Jack Goodman, two young American men, appear in the film's opening scene. During their 3-month journey through Europe, they intend to stop at a number of significant cities, including Berlin, Rome, and Paris. They are currently traveling to Italy by hitchhiking on a sheep truck across the untamed landscape of northern England. The boys are left on a lonely road by the driver, who stops as dusk draws near and says he's heading in a different way. He cautions the two to stay on the road and away from the moors before they leave. The boys then carry on with their trek on foot and soon find themselves in front of a bar named the Slaughtered Lamb. Then they see the pub sign, which features an image of a bloodied, beheaded wolf, impaled on a sword, with its tongue hanging out. The villagers quickly stop what they're doing and stare at them silently as soon as they go inside. Surprisingly, the locals resume their previous behavior when the two men give them instructions. Shortly after, Jack discovers a pentagram on the wall, painted in between two candles. When he tells David about it, they both start to wonder what it means. Then Jack asks the people who live there what the symbol means and why it is painted there. The whole bar unexpectedly stops talking and turns to glare at them angrily. They eject the boys from the tavern because, for whatever reason, they are enraged. The bartender seems concerned as the couple walks away and remarks that they can't let them go. The guys are merely cautioned by the bar patrons to stay on the road, stay away from the moors, and be mindful of the full moon. The two then exit the bar, still in disbelief over what had occurred to them. They continue to trek in the hopes of soon coming across a village to rest. But shortly after, it starts to pour heavily and the fog rolls in. The boys finally become lost as a result of this and veer off the main route. Shortly after, they feel terrified after hearing piercing cries in the distance. After making the decision to head back to the pub, they discover they are lost and unable to find their way around a moor. The lads sense something is getting closer to them as the growl becomes more and more audible. They take off running in the other way, but before long, a werewolf appears out of the mist and starts to attack Jack. When David arrives to save him, Jack has already been severely injured and is on the verge of death. The werewolf then assaults David after turning its focus to him. However, the townspeople arrive and shoot the creature dead before it can do any significant harm. David witnesses the dead werewolf changing into a bloodied, nude guy as he passes out. 3 weeks later, the scene shifts to David awakening in a London hospital. A guy from the US Embassy and a doctor called Hirsch greet him. When David asks about his pal, Hirsch responds that Jack was killed. Official accounts state that a deranged ex-convict attacked them. A nurse called Alex sedates David since he is acting irrationally due to his grief over his friend's passing. He makes it clear that a big wolf, not a crazy person, assaulted them before he passed out. 2 investigators come to interview him when he wakes up later in order to get his statement. David relates to them the identical tale of how a large wolf attacked them. But since 2 witnesses observed a crazy man assaulting the lads, the investigators don't think he's telling the truth. They disclose the discovery of the escaped lunatic's body and the autopsy reports confirmation that he was the attacker. The police now believe that David has experienced severe psychological trauma, which has altered his memory. The scene that follows shows David having dreams in which he sees himself sprinting through a forest in his underwear, cutting a deer to pieces with his teeth. Alex tells him to eat something when he wakes up so he can take his medication. David urges her to put down the tablet and says he will take it later. But she declines and she feeds him like a toddler. This gesture touches David, and he finds himself drawn to her. He dreams about running through the woods again, a strange dream that comes to him later as he falls asleep again. After a little while, he awakens in a hospital bed sporting a terrifying fanged visage. David rushes to tell Hirsch about his vivid nightmares as soon as he wakes up. However, the physician believes it is the outcome of his psychological trauma and reassures him that nothing is wrong. David tells the doctor that he's afraid and doesn't want to be alone, so he offers to send someone to stay with him. During the evening, Alex is seen with David, reading a book near his bed. She blushes as he tells her that she's really attractive. Not long after, he nods out and has another nightmare about a pack of wolfmen dressed as Nazis. Before slicing his throat, these men murder his family and set his house on fire in front of him. Right now, David wakes up and tells Alex that he just had a bad dream. She goes to open the curtains, thinking he's uncomfortable, but one of the Nazi demons stabs her out of nowhere. David is startled by what he sees, but he quickly wakes up and understands it was only another nightmare. David has a visit from Jack's ghost the following morning while eating breakfast. Jack's face has been severely damaged. Jack claims he is here even though David thinks it's just another nightmare. He says he's sorry for bothering him, but he had no choice but to come in order to warn him. According to him, David was attacked by a werewolf that goes by the name lycanthrope. David will become a werewolf on the upcoming full moon in 2 days due to the bite he received. Jack, on the other hand, is doomed to roam the planet in a state of suspended animation until the wolf's lineage is disrupted. Given that David has inherited his attacker's curse, he claims that he will be the final werewolf. In order to break the werewolf curse and save more individuals from becoming potential victims, Jack now wants his friend to unlive himself. David, on the other hand, doesn't think Jack is telling the truth and believes he is merely hallucinating. He starts calling for Alex and Jack vanishes as soon as she gets there. After giving Alex a kiss, David tells her that Jack had just paid him a visit and stated all of those things. She comforts him though, saying that it was probably just a dream. After David's discharge from the hospital the following day, Alex drives him to her flat. She explains that she doesn't typically bring men home in this manner when they arrive, but she still acknowledges that she is drawn to him. Then we witness the couple taking a shower together and having a romantic afternoon together. When David wakes up to use the restroom later that evening, he is frightened by Jack's ghost in the mirror. The man looks even more disintegrated than he was the day before. When they finally get to the living room, David is still of the opinion that Jack isn't genuine. But his pal tells him it's the full moon tomorrow, and he should take his own life while he can. A few moments later, Jack disappears again as Alex walks into the room. Dr. Hirsch visits the slaughtered lamb the following day to see if David is genuinely telling him the truth. The locals stare at him and go silent once more as he enters the pub. Hirsch asks them about the event involving the 2 American guys in an attempt to start a conversation. The patrons of the tavern, however, insist they never saw the youngsters and deny knowing anything about it. The doctor is disappointed by this and turns to go, but as he does, a young man approaches him. He admits that the youngsters were definitely attacked by wolves and warns David's neighbors that they are in danger. When he tries to divulge more, an old villager shows up and chastises him, sending the young man running. While Alex is at work in the evening, David is by himself at the apartment. He tries to kill time by watching TV, but as his body starts to burn, he screams in agony. A few moments later, he has thick hair growing out of his body, sharp claws sticking out of his hands and teeth showing from his mouth. In the end, David changes into a werewolf in the full moon's light. After that, he prowls London streets looking for victims. Soon after, he meets a couple who are headed to a friend's house for supper. To surprise their companions, they intend to enter via the back entrance. Sadly, though, the werewolf attacks and ruthlessly dismembers them. David finds 3 homeless men and a dog gathered around a trashcan fire in a junkyard later on. The dog bolts away after barking violently for no apparent reason. The men inquire as to whether anyone is present when they hear something snarling in the distance. But the werewolf jumps on them and kills them with brutality before they can realize what it is. Subsequently, he proceeds to a metro station and pursues a man down an escalator, ultimately taking his life. The action then shifts to the following morning, when David awakens in a wolf-caged zoo, completely nude. He is shocked by his circumstances and cannot recall what transpired the previous evening. Then he scales the barrier and leaves the area. He removes a child's balloon collection in order to cover himself, and then he robs a woman of her coat. Dr. Hirsch is reading a newspaper article about the 6 brutally deceased victims from the previous night in the meantime. David comes to Alex's apartment shortly after and informs her that he woke up in a zoo this morning for no apparent reason. Alex, meanwhile, doesn't give it much thought, figuring he's just having intense dreams once more. During their conversation, she gets a call from Dr. Hirsch, who wants to know how David is doing and expresses concern about his condition. Alex grants his plea for her to take David to the hospital. Later, when they are riding in a taxi, David informs Alex that he hasn't felt this wonderful in years due to his unusually high level of energy. The cab driver cuts them off when he brings up the news about the 6 fatalities from the night before. David's attitude abruptly shifts upon hearing this, and he acknowledges his friend was right. He exits the taxi right away, believing that he is the one who killed the people. After that, David approaches a police officer in the area, admits to killing 6 people, and says he wants to be taken into custody. However, the officer doesn't think he's telling the truth and won't arrest him without cause. David is disappointed by this, so he walks up to kiss Alex. He claims to adore her but that he has to keep his distance from her for her own security. Although Alex doesn't understand what he means, David doesn't bother to clarify and just leaves. Next, David tries to use a pocket knife to sever his wrists, but he is too afraid to accomplish it. At that moment, he spots Jack in the distance. He now resembles a skeleton. David goes with his companion to a pornographic theater, where he encounters the spirits of the 6 people who were killed the previous evening. All of them attempt to persuade him to take quick, painless ways to end his life, including shooting himself in the mouth or falling beneath a train. But David doesn't know how he would handle a work this difficult. Shortly after, the full moon reappears, and David turns back into a werewolf since he still lacks the resolve to take his own life. After his victims' ghosts disappear, David starts killing everyone within the theater. Officers show up on the scene shortly after, but by then the werewolf has made his getaway. He then starts attacking individuals and creating violent accidents, terrifying the streets of London. The werewolf carelessly bites off the head of the policeman who tries to put him in handcuffs. As people start to fear and run for their lives, this throws the city into pandemonium. Dr. Hirsch approaches Alex while she is sleeping and informs her about the disturbance. They both decide to go in the direction of the site since they think David must be the cause of all of this mayhem. They find that werewolf David is stuck in a dead-end alley with no way out when they get there. The area has been blocked off by several police cars, and cops are trying to keep bystanders at a safe distance. Alex pushes past the police in the last scene to get to the alley where the werewolf is hiding. She begs David to stop continuing on his rampage and sobs as she informs him that the police are going to kill him. She also says that she loves him, and for a split second, the werewolf appears to comprehend her feelings. He gives her a loving glance before giving in to his animal tendencies and growling at her. As soon as they realize this, the officers shoot him to death. When the film comes to a close, David transforms back into a person and passes away in front of Alex, but his face is solemn because he has finally been set free from the curse.